Please take a seat. We are fortunate today to have Nipun come down to our center on a short notice. Actually, we are grateful because today he was supposed to go back up north, but he changed his plan just because we requested him to come to our center. So on behalf of the center, Nipun, we thank you very much for changing your plan. He is a very well-known person, and he is a founder of Service Space Organization. He has received numerous awards, and he is on an advisory board of several high-level charity organizations, including the Dalai Lama Foundation. And his mission statement reads, "Bring smiles in the world and a stillness in my heart." With that introduction, I invite, on behalf of the Jain Center, Nipun, please come, and we want to listen to what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Do I need to turn it on or something?
Yeah.
That might help, right? It's on. You'll have to turn it on. Tell me what to do. Or I can use this. No. Patience is good. I'm happy to be here until he comes. This is not the formal time. I've had my experience of Aparigraha today because all my clothes have already gone to my home. And so this is all my rest of gifts from everybody. Mic is still not working, but now, wow. See, this is after pain, the glory of enlightenment. Thank you for being here. I wrote in the email that it's actually an honor for me to be in a sacred space where everyone brings that intention of reaching for something higher than themselves. So I always feel grateful to be in all sacred spaces, certainly here. I've been here once before, and it's a joy. Thank you. I want to talk about, I think I was supposed to talk, I changed the topic from humility, so if anybody wants a refund, talk to the organizers. It was on humility, but this morning I was at a church, and I was speaking about compassion. And I realized that compassion is the foundation on which humility is built. So I want to share a little bit about compassion and cultivating that compassion, how I have learned about compassion, and I'll get the disco lights. And then just share a little bit about humility at the end, some of my heroes of humility. So this is, to introduce myself, not my physical form and my physical identity, 2 steps to the right.
Light.
Oh,
Face.
light. I was trying to run away from the light.
To find a good mix.
This is, yeah, Dalai Lama, whenever he's on stage, he always puts like a sun visor on, right? I can see why. To give you an introduction of myself, not myself as a physical identity, but myself as the values that have inspired me and lighted my journey. I would say generosity is the core amongst them, service. But as I have grown in my service journey, what I have learned is that I started by giving. I wanted to serve other people. There's so much suffering in the world. I wanted to share whatever little I had, or whatever lot I had in some instances. But what I realized is that as I gave more, I realized that it was impossible for me to give without receiving. And then as I received, for me, the third stage was dancing. I always put this photo up to let everyone know that I used to have hair once upon a time. It's a true photo, it's not Photoshop. But this idea of dancing, where you can't keep track of how much you've given and how much you're receiving. Because we tend to do that, right? We say, I have given this much. And then sometimes even in receiving, it's like, well, I did this and this felt good. I did this, it didn't feel so good. So I'm not going to do that. We keep track. We have Excel spreadsheets in our minds to keep track of all this stuff. But over time, you realize that there's a far greater joy to surrender all that and just dance. This is what I've discovered. This photo is actually from a walking pilgrimage that my wife and I took in 2005. And we learned many lessons. Yesterday, at one of the events, I was sharing some of the stories. One of those stories where I learned this power of dancing, because you don't know who's giving, who's receiving. So many times I would go to some of these places, and it's very humbling. It's a position of humility to realize that you cannot keep track. Am I giving, even in this moment? Am I giving with my words, with my experiences, with my stories? Or are you giving with your attention, with your silent blessings, with your heart? It's hard to know. And anyone who seems to think, I used to think I had it figured out, but as I went further on my journey, I realized that there are slides or no more. And as I went further on my journey, I realized that it's just not quite that simple. I remember a lesson in humility, since we're talking about humility. I'll get to compassion soon too, but I remember one of the most humbling moments was when I met, my wife and I were walking, and we were walking through an area where there was very little water. And we go to this woman who sees us from a distance, this grandmother in a small hut. She calls us in. She gives us water. And later I discovered that it took her 4 hours to actually go and get this water. She just gives us this water. And then she looks at us and she says, you must be hungry. Do you want some bhajias? You know? So I was like, yeah, man, bhajias, man, my karma is ripening. On a pilgrimage, you never know what you're going to get. You know, many times you don't get anything, you know. So you're just rolling with it. And so I was like, but yeah, wow, in this area, I would have never thought, okay, fantastic, thank you, yes. I didn't say, I was like trying to be balanced, but, my heart was saying, my stomach was saying yes. The Dada was there, we had both of them, the grandmother and grandpa, they were both living in a small little hut. And the Dada is just doing chants this whole time. He's not really paying attention to us. But the grandmother is very full of love and is really feeding on us. And so at some point, it's almost time for us to go. The Dada looks at us, and he was chanting. He was busy in his prayers. The Dada looks at us and says, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "Dada, we are on a walking pilgrimage. We're trying to purify ourselves, purify our hearts, and we're doing it by renouncing a little bit and trying to serve a little bit in whatever ways we can. If we can push carts, if we can hold other people's haystack, or if we can, sweep and clean, we can tell stories, whatever ways come up to us, we're just trying to serve. But we're trying to purify ourselves through the process." So he looks at us and he says, "Oh, okay, that's great. That's a nice thing to do. Where did you guys start from?" And I said, "Dada, we started from Ahmedabad." And so he says, "Oh, Mehmedabad." said, no. Well, technically no. Should I just ignore it? I was like, okay, Dada is a little hard of hearing. I was like, Dada, not Memdawat, Amdawat. And he says, yeah, that's what I said, Memdawat. So I go a little closer, and I'm like, Dada, no, not Memdawat, it's Amdawat with an A. I didn't say it with an A, but in Gujarati I was speaking. And he says, oh, Ahmedabad. I said, Dada, Ahmedabad 127 kilometers from here. And Dada tells me, in one sentence, he completely clean bowls me. Right? Dada looks at me and he says, oh, so I see you're not on a pilgrimage after all. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're still keeping track of the number of kilometers. So here I had left everything. I was living from a backpack, a couple pairs of clothes, washing it every day, had nothing, very little. And yet my mind was still going in this rat race. I was still keeping track. I was giving, I was receiving, and I was keeping track. Hence, I was not dancing. And so it takes a big heart to realize that we are in this cosmic dance all the time, in every moment. And to reduce it down to our ego's intelligence is actually a disservice to ourselves and the world around us. So how do we live into that moment of dance? And you never know how life gives to you. So one of my friends is an amazing woman. She's known as the Mother Teresa of Pune. She is, that's her. That's Sister Lucy. Sister Lucy, bless you. Sister Lucy is known as the Mother Teresa of Pune, and she's very close to me, and she does remarkable work. She's won practically every award in the world. She has 9,000 kids, and 44,000 people are in touch with the organization every day. All this kind of great stuff in the world. But more than what she's doing, it's more about who she is becoming through that process of doing. And she's this remarkable person, and I have this great affinity for her, and so I'm always appreciating her. And one day she says, I really want you to come visit Maher. Maher is the organization she runs. And I said, yes, I would love to come visit. It took some time, but I finally ended up visiting this recently, this winter. And when I went there, she says, Nipun, I have a surprise for you. I have a gift for you. It's not a surprise. I have a gift for you. I said, wow, Sister Lucy is going to give me a gift. I was excited about it. I go there, and she tells me the story. This is us in one of their centers over there. What you can't see over there, what you see over there is a woman. Sister Lucy was going down the streets, and she sees this woman completely naked, has been abused like nobody's business, and she goes up just out of compassion to ask her something. This woman doesn't say a single word because of the trauma of being abused. Everybody else just left her on the street. Sister Lucy says, I can't do that. She picks her up, brings her to her center. She starts, they give her a shower, they give her clothes, they feed her, they take care of her. They thought maybe she would speak. She doesn't speak. Ends up she was pregnant. Because of the trauma, she couldn't even breastfeed the child. And so they had to work around it. And they did. And that woman that they found on the street is sitting right there. Because they delivered the child. And Sister Lucy says, they don't know the father's name. And so says, Nipun, since you're a male character, we're going to give her your first name is going to be her last name. So here I was, I'm dancing. I don't have any kids. My wife and I decided long back in our teen years that wasn't going to be our path. And so we don't have kids, and here I am. Now I have this person that's got my last name, and much more than my last name. It has Sister Lucy's blessings in my heart as well. So through my life, as I have gone through my life, I have seen that really even all the things that we do receive, it's not just because of our effort. It's not just because of our doing. It's actually a result of another dance. We are connected in dances, in each other's dances, in ways that are far beyond the ego's intelligence. So with that context, so this is we did a little ceremony, and I guess you don't have the audio. Oh, this is Sister Lucy. When Sister Lucy met the Pope, they had a few minutes encounter with the Pope. These are beautiful photos, and just in case you're wondering that, Pope is always so kind and loving and all that, I have this other photo. He's not exactly happy. So he's not always like a happy camper, Let's go back to this photo. Sister Lucy meets the Pope, and she used to be a Catholic nun, right? So it's a big deal to meet the Pope. And she says, Father, you know, I seek your blessings so that I can serve even more. And what does the Pope say? Sister Lucy, no, I seek your blessings. And that's great. One takeaway from that is that, wow, Sister Lucy must be amazing. But Sister Lucy's takeaway is the Pope is so humble. Your greatness is actually determined by how small you are. Because as you are so small, you're able to dance to the beat of the universe in a much greater way. You're becoming an instrument in a much stronger way. So these are the lessons that I keep learning, and as I go along this path, right, where does the dance lead us to? It leads us to what I think of as high bandwidth giving. Low bandwidth giving is sympathy. I have, you don't have, so I'm going to give to you. Reasonable. There's some good that comes out of that. That's a good thing. But it's not as deep as empathy. Empathy says, I feel your pain. I'm with you. I'm giving with a much deeper shared relationship. But what's even deeper, well, sympathy is very shallow in terms of an experience of generosity. I think yesterday I was saying how it's like there's a dial-up connection, right? And then this is like the 3G connection, and then you have the fiber optic connection coming up. So once you go to the fiber optic connection, it's compassion. It's this high bandwidth, deeply interrelated relationship with each other in which compassion flows. Sympathy is like, yeah, I got lucky, I had so many blessings, you poor person, you don't have, let me give to you. A lot of people have a lot of financial wealth given this way. It's sad, because they're giving, they're doing such a sacred act, but they're cheapening it. They're like, you know, it's like they're going back to the AOL days. Who wants to go back to AOL? When you get the fiber optics connection, you're like, wow, what a cheap one, drip, drip, drip. That's how you want to give? That's really, I mean, you feel sad about that, right? And then as you go, I keep seeing myself, no, this is good. You guys are professionals in the back. And then empathy, right? The problem with empathy is much deeper. You feel the pain of other people. But the weakness of empathy is that you burn out. There's so many mental health problems in so many different professions. People aren't able to keep up in the current generation. So what is the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion? And have we looked deeply into it? When we do an act of service, when we do an act of seva, right? Let's say we go out and do an act of seva, and I come and ask you after the seva, I interview you, I say, well, how much of it was sympathy? How much was empathy? How much was compassion? If you haven't done any inner work, you have no idea. You're just guessing. Or if you're super egotistical, you can say, oh, it was all compassion. But actually, what's happening? And if you aren't tuned in to that inner experience of giving, you're completely lost the whole possibility of that moment. You're just doing a little bit of this, when really the possibility is to do so much more with that same act. So what happens in compassion, I think of this as beggarly giving, sympathy. This I think of as friendly giving, what you would do with neighbors. And this, compassion, as kingly giving. That you go to a king's kingdom and you are treated with love, like royalty, not because of who you are, but because that is in my nature. I give to you like the roses scent because it's in my nature to give that scent unconditionally, without judgment. And so that's the compassion. But what strikes me is about a quality of compassion. I was speaking about this morning, is a story. This in fact came up yesterday in one of the Q&As at another temple. This is Mother Teresa, and one of my friends was with Mother Teresa volunteering, and when they came, someone visited a big funder, a big donor, and at the end of that visit, they wanted to take a photo, so they took a photo. But they weren't happy with the photo, so they said, well, Mother Teresa, can you, move back a little bit? And so Mother Teresa said, sure, no problem. And then they took another photo, and they said they weren't happy with that photo. They said, Mother Teresa, can you actually move your head a little to the right? So my friend watching this is furious. They said, oh my God, is this what you reduced Mother Teresa to some bits and pieces on your little camera? I mean, this is a global icon of compassion. But then, those guys looked at that photo and they said, even this is not good enough. They go to Mother Teresa and move her face. And my friend watching this, she's furious. She is like, oh my God, how dare you treat Mother Teresa this way? But she noticed that Mother Teresa didn't say anything. So she was like, I'm going to hold my anger. Well, when these guys go, I'm going to grill Mother Teresa. So when the guy leaves, and his whole entourage leaves, she goes to Mother Teresa and she says, Mother, why didn't you say anything? And Mother Teresa says one sentence that ended up changing my friend's life. She says, my dear, there are multiple forms of poverty. That this person had a lot of, in one form of capital, but had a different kind of poverty. That person who is at the doorstep doesn't have financial security, but they may have a different, they may have a different kind of wealth. And so she's just saying that no matter what your poverty, I'm here to be, if it makes you happy to move my face, please move my face. And so a person who sees that there are multiple forms of poverty also sees its contrapart, that there are multiple forms of wealth. And when you realize that in every moment I have a certain kind of poverty, you have a certain kind of poverty, I have a certain kind of wealth, and you have a certain kind of wealth. And in each moment, all of those things at so many different levels are interacting with each other. And you cannot keep track of this because you are balancing. And when you do that, then you have a very high bandwidth connection with life through that small act of service, through that small act of kindness. That's the potential. Doesn't mean we're going to do it. We can do drip, we can not do the act at all. Or even if we do it, we can do it with sympathy. We can do it a little bit better with empathy. But the potential is way deeper. Is that, wow, all your poverty, all my poverty, all your wealth, all my wealth in this moment, multiple forms of wealth, multiple forms of poverty, they're all coming together. And may we all be blessed and reach a higher ground. If you meet life in that way, that becomes very powerful. That, to me, is compassion. And on that foundation is how we can build on humility. So I want to get there. I want to tell you a few stories, which I shared this morning, so they're fresh on my mind. But these are stories of how I have learned compassion. We had an intern that asked me, so Nipun Bhai, how did you learn compassion? And so I said, to break it down to them, I said, oh, well, I learned it in freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. And today I'm going to give you the post-grad level too. But the freshman year is when you look for opportunities of compassion. When you look for these moments. They're there all the time, but we miss them. It's every moment. You can open the door, you can listen, you can be kind, you can give an umbrella to somebody if it's raining, somebody drop the glove, you can carry somebody's weight. You can do 20,000 things. It doesn't matter what we do. It's about what we open up inside ourselves because of that action. So, in the first year, we're going to win some opportunities and lose some. So this is one of my great favorite stories of me looking like a goofball in Berkeley. I'll tell you this story to you. And like I said, you may have a different image of me after this, but I'm going to say it anyways. So it was my wife's birthday, and my wife loves flowers. So I said, I'm going to go and get some flowers. And I'm going to our local Trader Joe's. I go get flowers because she loves sunflowers. I got some sunflowers. And I said, oh, she loves stargazer lilies too, so I'm going to grab some of those. I said, why? It's her birthday, let's just get 2 bouquets. But the thing was that what she also loved is not just flowers, she also loved for me to exercise and run. Right? She's like, Nipun, you put on some pounds in older years now. So he says, so I thought, like trying to be a smart cookie, I said, well, can I feed 2 birds with the same seed? Can I go running to get the flowers? She'll be super happy. So I went running to get the flowers, I pick up these 2 bouquets, now I'm running back. Now you can imagine this Indian guy running with 2 bouquets on the streets of Berkeley, right? So I'm sure I was looking like, an interesting little icon on the street. So as I'm coming, my apartment's over there, I'm about to reach that door. Right as I'm about to go there, there's a young woman from a high school person, because we live next to a high school. She's just walking through, and as she's walking, she looks at me, probably looking like slightly amused. She looks at me with a big smile on her face, and she says, "Oh, for me, you shouldn't have." And I was like, wow, that's a really funny joke, except I was so obsessed with my oxygen level that I just wanted to reach the end. And because I was so obsessed with reaching that end and just going there, because action was there, not here, I missed this opportunity, because really the best thing to do would have been, great, oh yeah, I should have, no, but I really did, all for you, you know, that would have been beautiful. But I didn't do that because I was so fixated. And that's a small example, right? That's a silly example in a way. But in a way it's not, because as soon as we have an outcome in mind, the more fixated we are on the outcomes over there, the more opportunities we miss along the way. And this is a standard thing. This is another one of my friends, his name's Wavy Gravy. I don't know if you guys eat Ben & Jerry's, but he's got a Ben & Jerry's flavor named after him. Wavy, oh, another photo with hair. I did not notice that earlier. Wavy had this one practice that he would, after he used to do poetry, and so he would have these poetry recitals, and then they would have a hat, and people would leave money in the hat, and sometimes after midnight he's going home, and he has, you know, some amount of money. And what he would do is he would look at some homeless people, and sometimes when his heart overflows, he takes some money from, you know, from his hat, he goes and stuffs it in the homeless man's pocket. And that homeless man's sleeping, and he's just thinking, wow, you know, next morning they're going to wake up, and they're going to put their hands in the pocket, and I'm like, oh my God, $100, you know. And that just gave him a lot of joy, so he did that. Now I heard that, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, I should do that sometime. So I'm going down the streets of Berkeley, and I'm like looking, I see this guy totally pieced out, sleeping, you know, in the lawn, and I said, oh yeah, I should do what Rudy did. I have a little bit of money, you know, and I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that would be a really cool thing to do. Like, I can go, and I'm thinking, how would I put it in, but a part of me is thinking, oh man, I got this meeting at UC Berkeley, I'm teaching this class, doing this, doing that, okay, you know, I don't really have time, what if it backfires, what if he wakes up, all this stuff, right? And I walk past him, and then I'm thinking, yeah, now it's a little too late, I should have done it, I could have done it, you know, and it passes. And this is exactly what happens in the first year. In your freshman year, you notice a lot, and some you're going to take, but some you will miss, because you're fixated on certain outcomes. Because you have a certain single-track mind, because it's your ego show. This is where you want to go. This is where the ego wants to go. It's totally, you know, bent up on going there. As a result, you miss a lot of opportunities on the way. But the good thing is, at least you realize you miss it. So what happens in the second year is that you realize that as you take some opportunities, those opportunities start to connect you. Anytime, any moment. I was in India one time, and it was 10 p.m. at night. 5 of us are walking down in Ahmedabad, and as we're walking down, all of a sudden, we had this idea. We said, you know, there are these people who are sweeping at night. Right? Maybe it was 11, I think it was 10. But they were sweeping the streets. All these old ladies come out and they start sweeping, you know, the streets. And so we looked at that and we said, okay, we can't really, you know, we kind of felt for them, and we said, you know, how can we be kind to them? So we just went up to them, we befriended them. There was a little lemonade stall. We said, you know, why don't you sip some lemonade while we sweep for you for 10 minutes? Of course, if you do it without any practice, they'll be like, no, you go home. You know, they're not just going to let you do it just because you want to do it. You know, but if you can create a relationship with them, they'll let you. They let us. In that particular case, they let us do it. And in just 10 minutes, we said, we're just going to give you a break of 10 minutes. Go and enjoy some lemonade at this stall. And so here these bads, right? They're like, who are you guys? Why are you doing this? And we said, we just wanted to, you're like our grandmas, you know, we just wanted to do something small. We know your life is tough, and we can't solve all those things, but maybe these 10 minutes will help. And they were so happy. And as we were doing this, like everybody coming down the streets is like looking, saying, what are you doing this for? We said, well, just to give them a little break. They said, oh, that makes sense. Which organization? Well, no organization. They said, what's your plan after this? We said, no plan. And they were like, oh, that's so simple. Then can I do it too? We said, yeah, sign up for a shift. You can get the next 10-minute shift. And it was a whole scene in Ahmedabad, by this little bridge, There's all these people lined up, and we're like, yeah, what are you just going to watch me sweep? If you're moved by it, why don't you start sweeping? And people did. And it was amazing. And I've done this thing so many times in so many different ways, and you just see very clearly every time that if you act out of compassion, invariably, anytime, anywhere, any place in the world, you will naturally connect with those around you. I was in Taiwan with these nuns, and that was amazing too. So they gave me all this money at the end of this talk, because that's their customary, not all this money, they gave me an envelope with some offering. And I said, look, my mom raised me to give to monks and nuns, not take from monks and nuns. I can't take it. And they're like, no, sorry, this is what our teacher said. We're going to give to you. I said, okay. And this other kid comes up and he says, you know, I know this is an awkward question. I used to give this talk and all, but I really feel like treating you to ice cream. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a good idea. Can someone get me some water, maybe? Thank you. So he goes and gets me, he says, I want to take you to ice cream. So now I have this envelope, and now I have this kid that wants to take me to ice cream. So I thought, well, as we're going to ice cream, I have this envelope. I invited a bunch of the nuns over. I invited a bunch of the people around me. I said, let's all go have ice cream. And when we go to ice cream, I decided that instead of me using the money, keeping the money, we're just going to pay for the whole sort of customer line behind us. So I didn't speak any Mandarin. This is on the streets of Taiwan, Taipei. And this woman, Gwyneth, happens to be next to me. And I said, hey, Gwyneth, can you help translate here? I don't know what... And she's like, I can, but I don't understand the idea myself. What do you mean? Why would you pay forward for the person behind you? I said, just to make their day. She says, I get it, but I don't know how to explain it. And so she's like in line. I said, too late, you know, you're already here. You have 30 more seconds and you have to explain it. And so she's like, okay, how am I going to explain this word? So she gets up and she starts speaking in Mandarin and she tries to explain this idea. She says, you know, we happen to have some extra money and we would just like to pay for everybody behind us. Please just do this. And as soon as the two kids behind, they were like in high school or something. And they were usually like, oh, you know, it's like boring. They're just doing their job. And as soon as they hear this, it's like, wow, really? You don't pay for them? You don't even know them. You just want to do this for them? And all of a sudden, like, I think I have a photo of them. Oh, a photo of the shaved ice cream. If you go to Taipei, you know what to eat. These are the two kids behind them. And what happened is somehow something got lost in translation, so they didn't actually tell them that, hey, you know, this is anonymous. So somehow we were standing on that table, and everybody in line came up to our table and just started giving me a hug. Right? Just started saying, wow, thank you so much. We didn't even speak the language. And there was completely a riot. Thank you. There was completely a riot of love in this space. And it was all because we did some small acts of kindness. It wasn't that much. It was just a little ice cream. Even if it's not something financial, you could still go out and create this love with just sweeping. And so you realize that this power of compassion is not just limited to you. That compassion, it connects us to a much deeper part of ourselves in which you and I start to connect with our essence, and me starts to turn to we. So it's a very powerful way to sort of engage. And then in the third year, what you start to learn is skillfulness. It's one thing to give to you what I have, but what if that's not useful to you? How do I actually learn to engage in skillfulness? How do I look at a whole giant, you know, like multiple forms, multiple dimensions, right? Multiple dimensions of reality in each moment. So much is going on. How do I find the most skillful way to reach your heart? We know Baba used to say this beautiful thing. He says you have to learn how to reach the heart, because if you don't, it's like entering a building from the walls, or entering the building from the windows. Much harder. But once you get in through the door, which is the heart, you can roam around everywhere inside. So how do you go into a situation and you say, well, this is the most skillful way? So this guy, I mean, there's many stories. I feel like I'm telling you another story, but okay, since I have his photo up, I'll tell you two stories. Is it okay? Yeah? Time-wise? Yeah. I can see. Okay, I'll tell you this story first. Julio Diaz, how many of you have heard of Julio Diaz? Oh, nobody. Great. So Julio Diaz is an everyday person. Yeah, you know this story. It's an amazing story. Julio Diaz, very nice guy, lives in New York, works at a nonprofit organization, does his seva in the world. But he's also changing who he is through the process of that seva in a very deep way. So every day he would go to work and come back, he would take the subway, and before getting off for his home exit, he would get off one station before. And as he gets off one station before, he goes to his favorite taqueria, has dinner, and then he goes home. So one day he's about to get off and get his favorite, food, the taqueria he goes to every single day. But along the way, this kid comes up to him, takes out a knife and says, "Give me all your money." So he says, okay, just be calm, here's your wallet. So he's giving him all the money. Now the kid's taking the wallet and running away. As he's running away, Julio says, "Hey kid, it's a little cold. Do you want my jacket too?" This kid turned around, and I'm sure he's thinking this is not taught in Robbery 101, right? Like, do you go back? Or is this a trap? He comes back, and he's like, "Yeah, it's a little cold." And so he says, okay, he took the jacket. Now the energy between them was totally different, because now Julio's actually the giver. As that energy is different, Julio asks one more question. "Hey kid, I was about to go get a burrito at my favorite taqueria. Do you want to join?" Also not taught in Robbery 101. What do? He decides to say, okay. They go, they have this wonderful meal. At the end of the meal, it's time to pay the check. And Julio says, "I would pay for you, but you have my wallet." So this kid, you know what he does? Takes out the wallet, gives it back to Julio. And that's great. But then Julio goes one step further and asks him, "Hey, can I ask you for one more thing?" He says, "Sure, what? Can I have your knife too?" And the kid gives him back the knife. Now this is skillful, because this is not a recipe. You can't say, okay, let's get 50 Julios, everybody do one act of knife intervention today, everyone in this area, let's go out, here's the marching orders, here's the recipe, go out and do it. If you do it, you're in trouble. It takes a Julio. It takes that context. They connected in that way, in that deep way. And how? Because he had that foundation of compassion. He missed some opportunities, he learned to take those, he realized that compassion starts to connect you, and in that sort of multidimensional connection, he says, oh, I can actually ask for his knife in this particular situation. So that's skillfulness. There's so many, I could tell you story after story. I'm thinking of, maybe in the question and answer, but this is a very important talent. Usually what we do is whatever we have, we inflict it on other people. And we call that giving. That's not giving. That's you dumping off what you have. And in most cases, it's usually leftovers. You don't say, oh, this is the best thing I have, let me give it away. Right? Maybe some of you do, and then I bow down to you, those people. But usually we're giving leftovers. But as we realize that what skillfulness does is it forces you to connect with the other person before you pass something on. Because maybe what you have is not what they need. Maybe what they really need is something you need to go cultivate and build. Do a lot harder work. Do a lot more work before you can take that one moment to connect with this person over generosity in a very deep way. So that's skillful compassion. That's the third year. And in the fourth year, I think you get to what is courageous compassion. Because once you're skillful, once you know how to find that door of the heart, and you're able to roam in, and you're able to get the knife, you're able to heal yourself, other people, everybody wins. And once you're able to do that, then you're ready for courageous compassion. This is my friend Madhu. Madhu, I don't know if you remember the Delhi gang rape sort of situation that happened. Madhu was very upset about it, and so he went out and asked everybody, what's a small way in which you are being the change? Not like big ways. What's one small thing you're doing? And everybody would say, I listen to elders. I help kids cross the street. I don't use plastic. I'm vegan. Like all these things, and he would, have them write it up on a board, and he would take a photo, and he would spread these, and he's a very good photographer. So he was doing that. So he had this whole background of compassion. Now one day he comes home, and he noticed he was in a bit of a rush, so he parked his car. And because he was in a rush, he parked his car in a way that kind of, we all do that sometimes, right? We take like 2 spots instead of 1. So he kind of took 2 spots. Accidentally, just by a little margin, but he did that. Next time he comes back down, someone has smashed his window. And he's like, I know who this is. This is that guy on the 4th floor. Because he knew that he had these cross relations, and he knew that that was his parking spot next to him. And he saw that there's a stone with which the guy smashed his window, and he says, oh, that stone is still there. And oh, his car is right outside there. And oh, I have all this anger, and I have a young child. And he gets into this fatherly mode. He picks up this stone, and he goes over, and he's about to smash his window. And then he says, oh, wait. There's compassion. Why is it not happening to me? Why am I just angry in this moment? It was too much for him. So he's about to go smash it, but he says, okay, why don't you just pause? And so he pauses, he waits, he drops the stone. He thinks about all these different people that he has been photographing. He thinks about all his different friends that he has looked up to and that have inspired him. And he says, yeah, maybe I can be compassionate, but I'm burning with rage. What do? He says, okay, just pause. Puts the stone down. He goes up, and it's Diwali time. So there were a bunch of sweets. He lives on the 3rd floor, and this other person was on the 4th floor, as I said. So he goes to his home, and he sees a bunch of sweets, and he says, okay, well, I was able to contain my anger. And I didn't do eye for an eye, leaves the whole world blind. So he says, I didn't retaliate, I wasn't vengeful, but at the same time, I'm still feeling all this anger. And he says, is it really possible that I could turn this anger into compassion? I've heard so many stories. I've heard so many people tell me, but can I actually turn it deep down inside? And he says, if I had, then I would be able to take this box of sweets on my table up to the 4th floor. And it was Diwali time. So he goes to the table, picks up a box of these sweets, these Diwali sweets, and he brings it up. And as he describes it, in his own words, he says, he lives on the 3rd floor, this person's on the 4th floor. It took him half an hour to climb that 1 flight of stairs. He was like, so much of my being was saying, no, you can't be kind to the person who's hurting you. You can't do this. This is not. And he says, but there was a big part of me that was saying, oh, I can love. I can be unconditionally kind. And actually, this love part of me is much, much stronger than this fear and hatred part. This revenge side. And this is courageous compassion. Because he goes up. He actually climbs up. He goes 30 minutes. Knocks on the door. The guy's not home, but his wife is home. And the way he tells the story, he says, well, that was the limit of my compassion that day. I just gave her the box and I ran down. I was like, I can't deal with this. But he was trying. And this kind of trying, this kind of inner turning, this kind of forgiveness, realizing that we're all in a chain of conditions. When somebody hurts us, you can say that this person hurt me, but that's actually an inaccurate view of the situation. One of my friends was in a prison in a circle. And in this circle, everyone was asked a question. They were doing this, they all have one thing in common. They've all killed at least one person. So they were all what we would call murderers. Murderer sounds like such a vulgar term, but I'm just using it for reference here. They had all killed at least one person. And in this circle, as they're sharing, one of the guys gets up and he says, you know what I think? He says, I think hurt people hurt people. That actually when this other person is hurting somebody, it's because they were hurt. Because somebody else hurt them. They were just paying forward the pain. And a little bit later, in that same circle, somebody else says, you know what I think? I think it's true that hurt people hurt people. But I think it's also true that healed people heal people. And heal people how? By turning that negativity inside and saying, I want to react, but instead, I'm going to be balanced and I'm going to learn how to respond. And that's the fourth fear. That is real courage. Because you're turning all those things inside. And so, as you go through these years, right? Do I have the fifth year? As you go through these years, right? You look for opportunities. As you take them, you realize that you are actually connecting with other people in this way. As you connect, you learn how to be more skillful. You're not just dumping what you have onto other people. And then you realize that you have this capacity, this immense capacity, to be courageous with your compassion. But all this really was a setup to get you to the fifth point, which is supposed to be my topic for today, which is humility. Because as you do this, I think you get to the fifth stage, which is sort of the, I don't know, what happens after senior year. If you're on a 5-year plan, right, in college, or postgraduate, which is humility. We think of courage in a sort of football player-like way. Right? The ego wants to think that, oh, I'm courageous, I'm strong, I'm powerful. But actually, compassion is the exact opposite. It's very small, it's very gentle, it's very nimble. Bruce Lee, who never lost a fight in his life, he could actually kill, there are videos of him, he could kill people with a 1-inch punch. And there's videos of him, actually not killing people, but there's videos of him with just 1 inch, like person sitting on a chair, and they're like flying off. Like Bruce Lee had that capacity, and when they asked him, hey Bruce, what's your secret? He says, you must be like water. I can't do his accent. You must be like water. Because water can be tamed even by a child. And at the same time, it can move mountains. So this kind of compassion, as you really learn to deepen into this force of love, you realize it's very gentle. It's not like a macho thing. It's not like a power thing. It's not like I'm king of the hill kind of a thing. It's actually just sort of like the Pope saying, no, Sister Lucy, you bless me. Dalai Lama, one of my friends, was with the Dalai Lama. There are 40 of them. And they were having a dialogue over a span of a couple of weeks with the Dalai Lama. So every day they would get together. And their usual practice was everyone gets inside, and then the Dalai Lama walks in last. And as the Dalai Lama walks in, everyone bows. And so my friend also bows. And then you get up, and then what the Dalai Lama would do is he would bow back. But what my friend noticed is that the Dalai Lama would bow to different heights every day, right? Monday, Tuesday, like Wednesday, Thursday, a little higher up. And he's like, well, what's his logic? Is it like the lunar calendar, or what is it? Like how is he deciding how low to go? And then on the last day, he says, I figured it out. You know what the Dalai Lama was doing? He says, he was looking at how low we were bowing. And he would look at the lowest bow and make sure to bow even lower. That is a powerful person because of their humility, because of their smallness, not because of their cuteness. Gandhi, when he published, I don't know how many of you know this story, this is one of the first copies of My Story of My Experiments with Truth, his autobiography. This was an Indian version. This is the version that if you go to, I don't know, they don't even have Barnes and Nobles now, so Amazon. You would see that photo. But before it got published, Gandhiji wrote his autobiography, and he sends it to his best buddy. Right, he says, hey man, can you tell me what's the review, man? What do you think? And his best buddy was none other than Vinoba Bhave, right? These guys are legends. And so he sends it to Vinoba Bhave, and he says, hey, tell me what you think. And Vinoba Bhave says, well, he writes back a letter. He says, I don't think it can do any harm. I mean, imagine that as a review, right? You like poured your heart out, you've written all this stuff, and then your best friend's like, yes, it's not going to hurt anybody, so go ahead, do what you want to do. This is Gandhiji and Vinoba, right? But Gandhiji gets that letter from Vinoba and writes back. And he says, good. Because the purpose of all this is to be zero enemy. So here is the father of a nation. Somebody that we all owe a great deal of debt to. He is saying that the purpose of all his work is to be zero. Now, how many heads of state do you know that would go out and say, good, yeah, I just want to be empty. And all of this stuff that's happening, I'm just trying to be empty. I want to be last. I want to be zero. I want to be nothing. Which CEO says that? Which G8 country, G7 country? Who is saying these kinds of things in leadership positions? But here was Gandhi who was saying that. What was his secret? He said that as I get empty, he's talking about this thing called soul force. But even before he goes there, Gandhiji used to go on these fasts. So a lot of people, I mean, so many papers have been written on debating. Well, you know, if you fast, if you're Hindu, you're Muslim, you're fighting, Gandhiji comes in, he goes on a fast, and you say, well, if you go on a fast like that's kind of like, you know, manipulation. Right? Isn't it? Aren't you being coercive? Aren't you emotionally manipulating them? Of course you are. But was that what Gandhiji was doing? There's a lot of papers that talk about that. But actually, if you study Gandhi, you'd realize that's not what he was doing at all. Gandhi's trying to be zero. He's not trying to solve this one thing in some small-minded way by using his own body and his own existence to emotionally blackmail these people. That's not what he's doing. Because Vinoba asked him. He says, so Gandhiji, how do you decide when to fast? Because there's so many conflicts. And he would only fast in certain ways. He says, how do you decide when to fast? He says, I listen to my inner voice. But Vinoba, being Vinoba, was, you know, sort of a mathematical mind, very skeptical. He's like, well, how do you decide 21 days? Why not 20 days? Why not 19? Because he's saying this inner voice is telling him. He's like, well, how many number of days? And Gandhiji says, I actually asked for my inner voice. How many days should I do it? Gandhiji was not strategizing. He didn't have a think tank. Before the Dandi March, 2 weeks before the Dandi March, this is Narayan Desai, Mother Desai's son, telling me the story firsthand, who's now passed away. 2 weeks before the Dandi March, Tagore, it seems, was walking through the Gandhi ashram. And he says, Bapu, everyone is looking at you to see what your next step is going to be. What are you doing? Because, you know, the Britishers thought he's scheming something because they couldn't figure it out. They didn't have the kind of advanced tracking we have now. But still, they were like, yeah, what, this guy's still going about his business, doing the same old thing. Like, what's the strategy? What are they scheming? But Gandhi says to Tagore in a very clear way, he says, I don't know, but you can be sure that I'm praying. He doesn't know. He doesn't know when the answer is going to come. He doesn't know what the answer is going to be. He's just praying. His refuge is to go deeper within. And just because you pray, it doesn't mean you're going to get an answer. It doesn't happen on your time and my time. It happens on divine time. So you just have to wait infinitely. So he didn't know that, oh, in 2 weeks I'll have an answer and I'm going to do the salt march. Nope. He was just praying. That's what this man was doing. So when you're zero, or when you're even attempting to be zero, you actually engage with this remarkable thing called soul force. What Gandhi called soul force. You may not believe soul, so forget the word. What he's talking about is an intelligence, a force, a capacity that is far greater than our egos. And you saw the result of all this. Apart from the independence, right? Apart from this, you know, historic example, you see the examples in his life. This is General Smuts. He's staunch like adversary in South Africa before he came to India. Now this guy was out to beat Gandhi. You know what? He puts Gandhi in jail. You know what Gandhiji does? He decides to make him those shoes. By hand. His opponent, his enemy. And this guy, when he loses to Gandhi, writes, and this is all recorded, he writes, he says, what an honor to have an antagonist like Gandhi. He's losing to Gandhi and he is appreciating, he says, what an honor, man, to lose to you, hats off. I feel blessed to lose to you. Eknath Easwaran has written many books. He says, he never met Gandhiji, but he says, Gandhi was fasting. And whenever he would fast up in Ahmedabad, I couldn't eat my meals down in South India. He says, what was it about this man? That when he is fasting, I can't eat. I want to eat, but I can't eat. And he says, I knew I had to learn more. Because there was something that was going on that was way deeper, because this man was trying to be empty. Einstein said, we'll never believe that such a man existed in 500 years, right? Tagore, who opposed him intellectually in so many ways, says, man, you cannot call him Gandhi, you have to call him Mahatma. He coined that phrase. Raman Maharshi, this great Indian sage, when Gandhiji passed away, now, such a sage, such an awakened person, he's not gonna, he's not gonna be like, oh man, I'm really gonna miss you, man. Who am I gonna text from now on? He doesn't do that, right? But guess what happened when Gandhiji was assassinated? He starts crying. For 2 days, he was teary. Everybody's asking him, everyone's wondering what's going on. He had never even met Gandhi. In fact, Gandhiji crossed through his ashram one time, and he didn't stop there. He stopped, if you've ever been to Raman Maharshi's ashram, right, in Arunachal, you would know that right next to him, was his assistant's sort of ashram. Gandhiji didn't stop there. He would send all these people that were burnt out in the movement, he would send them. He says, go to Raman Maharshi's ashram. But he never went there himself. He went to the neighborhood. He went to the compound next to him. And because his devotees knew what kind of connection they had, they asked him. He said, oh, Maharshi, what? If Gandhiji was here and he just went next door, you guys both talk about each other in this beautiful, why didn't he stop here? And he said, he was so ripe that if he actually came here, he would just drop. He wouldn't be able to fulfill the vows that he has taken. Such is the force. Where you see Dalai Lama winning the Nobel Peace Prize, and who does he dedicate it to? To a guy who had never won the Nobel Peace Prize, which is Gandhi. Of course, you have Obama telling all kinds of good things about him. These are the 9 things he had, though, when he died. And here, this quote is really powerful. Actually, I have a video. Let's try the video. No? Can you turn the audio on? This is worth waiting for. Is it going to take a long time? So it's okay. Are you attempting it? Okay. No. Okay, I'll read it out. It's okay. This is a true story. When Gandhiji was assassinated, this was Edmund Murrow on CBS. This is his quote. This is what he said. He says, man without wealth, without property, without official title or office, Mahatma Gandhi was not a commander of great armies, nor a ruler of vast lands. He could boast no scientific achievement or artistic gift. Yet men, governments, and dignitaries from all over the world have joined hands today to pay homage to this little brown man in the loincloth who led his country to freedom. So how is it that we have so much? We think we have so much. We all have so much. And yet this guy who's got nothing, who writes his autobiography and he says, well, good, my purpose is to be zero. How is it that he's able to create such radical change in the world? Because by being empty, he's able to be an instrument of something that's far greater than his ego. That's a clip from the Gandhi movie, which I'll share. This was another person that taught me, personally. He passed away. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dada Vaswani. Just an incredibly humble person. I've had many opportunities to interact with him very closely. And I remember at one point, sort of like the Pope telling Sister Lucy that, Sister, I seek your blessings. I remember being with him and just feeling this, and I didn't even know who he was at the time. And I was just like, wow, this old Sufi man, I just want to bow down and say thank you. How can I be helpful? So I did. And we would have in this conversation, he said we've met many times in the past and we've had like remarkable exchange. It was like I'm trivializing it by even sharing this. But in this interaction, we would have many moments where we would just stare at each other. And at his level, you know, that sounds great. At my level, I'm like, okay, yeah, I look at him. that's not entirely true because I was also in the zone. And here we are locked at one point, and I said, I just want to say thank you to this person, whoever he is. I didn't know anything about him at the time. And I said, man, here's a noble person. I seek your blessings, and may I be in service. How can I be in service? And Dada opens, he just passed away a week and a half ago, I think 2 weeks ago maybe. Dada cups his arms, and he says, I seek your tears of compassion. What a thing to ask for. I was just in the stunned awe. And it was more than just a stunned awe. It was a multi-dimensional sort of engagement with him in that moment. And what he taught me, and what I felt in his presence, was that smallness is where it's at. We think that we feel like we're left out, and that we actually want to get bigger so that we can have. But that's the wrong way. This guy's saying, I want to be, his teacher said, I don't even want to be the zero because zero is too big. I want to be a nukta, as he said. He's just a dot. So how do we tap into this? And I remember at one point, this humility, you can see why it's born out of compassion, because when we were in this locked gaze, and he's looking at me with tears of compassion, and I'm like, oh my God, like how can I be? What a thing, I don't know, it was a remarkable moment for me. And as we're looking at each other, he recites this poem. Like eyes locked. Like here is a very saintly person, and he's looking at me and he's saying, he recites this poem by Shantideva. He says, may I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitude of living beings. What a thought. May I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and the sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. So he's saying that I love you so much that although the gateway of awakening is open for me, I will wait for you to help you cross through. And not you, one person, all living beings. What about? What a thing. And he's saying that I'm going to get there not because with all my might, you get there because you are small and even smaller and even smaller. And as you are smaller, you become an instrument for something much larger to flow through. So, for me, the journey has been, we'll do some Q&A here, but for me, the journey has been about small acts of kindness. Most of you, I'm guessing, I don't know how many of you know about smile cards, but they're there. Smile cards encourages you to do a small act of kindness. You go to a toll booth and you pay for the car behind you, for example. And the person behind you, the card says, you don't know who did this, it's anonymous. But don't let the chain stop. Pay it forward. Keep the chain going. It's very powerful to do that because in this culture we've forgotten this reminder. If we find something on the street, we're like, oh, my lucky day, I keep the $100 bill. We've gotten a priceless gift called the human birth. You can never pay back for those 9 months and much more. So we're in debt. Day one. You can't pay back. What do you got to do? You have to pay forward. But we forget to pay it forward. And so this is a small little card, in a very mundane way, is a reminder to do that. And then we have Smile Decks. I don't have them here. It has a bunch of ideas. Today, we have a bunch of these 21-day, we just printed these. Some of you might have seen them at one of the other events. It's beautiful. It's like it's a journal. We do this online. A 21-day challenge. Every day, you get one email, one idea, and you have to go do that idea and reflect on it. And so we would do this virtually, and hundreds of thousands of people have done it virtually. But then someone said, well, I'm like more a journal kind of guy. So we created a little journal. There's a kindness journal, 21-day kindness journal, where you get an idea, you have to do that idea. That's what's written on the left side. Right side is blank. And so you write in. But you have to do it. But I mean, all this, it's not about that. It's about what's happening inside of us. These are just tools. But they're very powerful tools, in the sense that kindness, the practice of kindness, is a very powerful tool. The practice of small acts of service is a very powerful tool, because it takes us all the way from the mundane to the zero. It has the potential to do that. You can choose to go with the sympathy drip, drip, drip model, but you also have the option to go super high bandwidth. With the smallest effect, doesn't matter how the size of the outside. What matters is what's happening on the inside. And I think this photo speaks a lot to. This is a photo of oak trees. For Hurricane Katrina, all these buildings got swept up. Buildings like this. Right? We think we put so much money, we take so much pride in our buildings and our institutions and all the things we do, and we should. Some of it is good. But one stroke of nature and everything's gone. Just like that. All your hospitals and schools and everything, gone. Or a fire. We have a fire right now, it's unfortunate. But in Hurricane Katrina, what didn't die are these oak trees. What didn't get swept up are these oak trees. And the reason why they didn't get swept up is because these oak trees have very deep roots. And so this big hurricane comes, and they say, oh my God, I need backup, let's go to my roots. But it's not just roots. It's not just my roots. It's the connection of my roots to your roots, and your roots to other trees' roots. Sometimes those roots connect for a span of 100 miles. This is documented. One tree, you cannot uproot it. No hurricane can uproot this, because it says, I need backup, goes in to its roots. I need more backup, mobilizes 100 miles of this root system. And how are we going to create these roots? What are these roots? These are the acts of selfless love that we have done. In any moment, no matter what we do, wherever we do it, if there is that selfless intent underneath it, we create this affinity. And if we are in this web of this affinity, that is going to be the trampoline, because the hurricanes are coming. Hurricanes are inevitable. Hurricanes are the hallmark of this dimension of reality. You can't stop the hurricanes. But what you can do is build your roots so you can be a sturdy oak tree, and you can give refuge, you can give service, you can be a lamp for other people. You can be an instrument. But you do this not by having more, you do this by actually being humble and emptying. So I leave you with that image to reflect on it, and I have a little video. Oh, we're not able to play videos, but are we? This is a beautiful small act of kindness video. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, but it's okay.
Put your mic on the PC.
I could. That's not going to sound right. It's okay. Why don't we? Well, okay. I'll go back. I should have a proper ending. I'll just say thank you. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from some of you. And there's also stuff before you leave out.
Can you just talk about that video?
Can I talk about the video?
What is the kid going to do?
Oh, all right, okay. Okay. You want live commentary? It's actually very short. So here's this little kid. He has very little. He's about to go. It's actually got a Gujarati, beautiful Gujarati soundtrack. And all of a sudden, guess what he finds? A $50, 50 rupee note. He says, what am I going to do? I've got an idea. Oh, ice cream, here we go. Whether you're in Taipei or India, you got ice cream. And so he's thinking he's going to the city and he wants to go get some ice cream. And all of a sudden, as he's walking, he's like eyeing which one? He's got other choices. He's got slippers, toys. What's he going to get? Oh, other people eating ice cream. He's super tempted. And then boom. He sees that this kid is playing soccer, and he just destroyed this grandma's cups at the tea stall. Just come over here. You little rascal. And, okay, grandma with a big heart. It's okay, take your ball. Don't do it again. Goes out. She's sweeping it up. Oh, there is a little flash of inspiration. Is he going to go get ice cream? Maybe, maybe not. She cleans up. She turns around. And what does she see? A bunch of glasses. That's beautiful. It's a lot better without my narration, I promise you. He's going out with a big old smile. So, yes, that's wonderful. We'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments for a few minutes before we go home.
Jajirendra, thank you. Please raise your hand. Please ask one question at a time. And Narendra Jain is moving around and I am moving around. And please use the mic to ask your question. Thank you.
What would you say is the main difference between empathy and compassion?
What would you say is the main difference between empathy and compassion? So if you ask scientists that question, they tell you very clearly that when you engage in an act of sympathy, there's a particular part of your brain, I know you said empathy and compassion, I'm getting there. When you engage in sympathy, it activates a certain very ancient part of your brain. So sympathy has been part of the human evolutionary process for a long time. Empathy activates a very different part of your brain. You actually feel the pain of other people. So it's like you're in pain. And there's a way to do that, even just experiencing that. And a lot of people experience that. Compassion comes from a very different part of the brain. It's actually in your prefrontal cortex. And so your experience of all of these three is significantly different. So, yes, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? I think in empathy, you feel the pain of other people. I think by my definition, with compassion, you don't take on the pain, but you still hold out a hand to help them with their suffering. That I think there's a difference there's a famous quote that says, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So to realize that when you see somebody in deep pain, you're not going to be able to take on all their pain and solve all of it. So, but maybe the pain is inevitable, but there is that optional suffering part, and maybe I can lend a hand with that suffering. But the part of the brain in which it's very regenerative. Empathy tires you out, empathy burns you out. They've done a lot of research on this. You can look up Tanya Singer, who talks about this. But yeah, it's a very different process. So if you find yourself burning out, you're probably not doing compassion. You're probably doing empathy. And if you don't feel this engaging high of like this deep connection, you're probably just doing sympathy. Yes.
If compassion is one kind of energy, so we cannot destroy the energy, but we have to, which energy is transferring into the compassion? From deep inside, when we go, at that time, if we have to cultivate compassion, then which negativity or which kind of energy we transferring into the compassion?
I don't think we're transferring any into compassion. I think what we're doing, compassion is our fundamental nature. So Buddha said there are 4 Brahma Viharas. I don't know enough about Jainism, so I'm showing you. Maybe some of you can illuminate me afterwards. But the notion was that you don't need to learn compassion. You don't need to transform something into compassion. Compassion is actually your basis, your true nature. But it's covered up with clouds. And when it's covered up with clouds, you have to figure out how to part the ways of the cloud and connect with your true source. So it's not, you don't need to create compassion. You don't need to turn anything into compassion. That is just who you are. You just need to remove all the different filters and clouds that are on top. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, it was wonderful. My question is, does compassion necessarily lead to humility? I'm not certain about that.
Yeah. I don't think sympathy or empathy lead to humility. For sure. I know, you said compassion, but you guys are on point, man. It's like, I've got the preamble, but no, they're like, that wasn't the question. No, I think sympathy or empathy definitely doesn't necessarily lead to, I don't think it mandates a kind of humble outlook. I think compassion, as you go deeper into it, it certainly does. Because to be compassionate, you need to go from me to we. And as your sphere of we expands, it makes no sense to take credit for anything. It's not that you're trying to be humble. It's just that this is how reality is. A lot of people think, oh, Gandhi was so humble, he would say, I'm lower than dirt. And the thing is, he is lower than dirt. It's just that from a very frame of reference from the ego, you're like, oh man, that guy's really humble. It's not that, it's that you're really lost. Right? It's more of that than, so our true nature, we are actually, so how do we expand as we go into compassion? We expand from me to we. And as that sphere of we expands, then all of a sudden, you no longer want to take personal credit for anything because you realize that was always a false idea to begin with. How can you take credit? It's even intellectually, it's a really baffling idea. This idea of a self-made man or a self-made, like this afternoon, we were at this church. It was a giant church, everybody, and it was like this, there was this feeling of, churches do this really well, I don't know, maybe it was the songs or whatever, it was this kind of euphoria, And as I was speaking, one of the things I shared was that, how do you know, okay, I'm speaking, you're listening. And I say, this is where Nipun stops, and this is where Robert Uncle begins, this is where, so you have boundaries in the physical world, in the field of matter. In the field of mind, not so clear. Right? So where is your mind and where is my mind? And where's the boundary between them? They've actually shown that couples who are super connected to each other, they start to breathe in the same pattern. When you go to concerts, people's heartbeats start to synchronize. We all know there's at least a dozen of these examples. They're all backed scientifically, so we know that even without physical contact, there's so much happening. But where's the boundary? And if you don't know the boundary, how do I know? For me to have thought, for me to speak, I need to have thoughts. And for my thoughts, I need to know where my mind is. And where's the boundary? So whose words are these? They're coming out through this apparatus. But is it yours? Is it yours? Is it all of us? Is it some of us? Is it those who are engaged? And have you even looked at all that? Have you tried to feel into what's happening? Most of us haven't. But I think as you expand, go from me to we, it just becomes very common sense that it's just not the ego show. That's been a design flaw that we have inflicted on ourselves. It's so heavy, it's so cumbersome, it creates a lot of suffering, but that's just not how life is. So I think we just need to wake up to that, and then I think compassion is a way to do that. I think it's necessarily true that those who are truly compassionate have to be humble. And if they're not humble, I would say that they're not actually compassionate. And it's very hard to distinguish on the outside. Just because somebody does acts of kindness, or so, even somebody becomes famous, even somebody changes the world, that is not necessarily a definition of compassion. Yeah?
Hey, can you just tell everybody about your service space, all the circles and everything? A lot of people would like to know about it.
Oh, there you are, service space. Yeah, I forgot. See, look at that. What kind of a CEO am I? I forget my own organization. I don't, but thank you for asking. I think what service space does, fundamentally, is it provides a very pure instrument and platform. When I say pure, I don't mean to say pure in that sense, but just it doesn't have an agenda. So although it's, it touches millions of people every month now, And as it's doing all this, I can be here and I can tell you I have no idea what it's doing. So we started by building websites for nonprofits. We built thousands of websites. Sumit was there in the early days. And then, over time, we said, well, let's go out and create other solutions because we had so many volunteers who could do so many things. So we started to say, let's put out one bit of good news every day. YouTube came out, we said, let's do Karma Tube with inspiring videos. And then we said, let's start to create games like Smile Cards to encourage kindness in the world. And then we said, let's do stuff offline. So we were holding Awaken Circles in different homes, including my home, where my parents have been hosting Awaken Circles, which are you sit an hour for silence, second hour is a circle of sharing, and third hour is dinner in silence. My parents have been hosting it every week for the last 20 years. And you know, my mom is fed with her own hands. We clothe over 50,000 people. And no judgment, not in the center, just kind of humble in the back. We had an Awaken Circle yesterday, we had an Awaken Circle the day before. So there are now so many around the world. We also run things like Karma Kitchen, where, I don't know how many, have you guys know about Karma Kitchen, Seva Cafe? Yeah, a few of you? You walk into a restaurant and your check reads zero. It's zero because someone before you paid for you, and you have a chance to pay forward. You are trusted to pay forward. You are trusted that if love will beget more love, that you will tap into that good side of you. Because look, if everyone is evil and dark and selfish, Karma Kitchen shuts down. And so people said, yeah, you know, I believe yesterday, I asked in an audience, right? I said, how many of you think that we're mostly selfish people with a few moments of selflessness? And how many people think that we're mostly selfless and with a few moments of selfishness? 50-50. Right? And so you say, yeah, well, we have a lot of examples of how selfishness is up there, right? We have a lot of presidents now of countries that exemplify those virtues. But what about the examples on the other side? What about the Gandhis of the world who say, I want to be zero? And what is their technology and how are they changing the world? And so Karma Kitchen and examples like that. At the church where I spoke today, they decided something radical. They said, you know what, we want to do this thing around Karma Kitchen, so now our bookstore is no longer going to have fixed prices. You come in and you pay whatever you want. You're trusted. Will people take advantage of it? Will people engage in relationship? Will people come in with greed and transform to selflessness? Will the clouds part? And the pastor of this church says, I don't know, maybe I will fail, but I want to fail in love. I want to fail in generosity. And so ultimately, through all our different experiments, we're doing dozens of things around the world with so many people, but ultimately it's about this. That can we give examples of love prevailing? I want to fail in love. Go ahead, you can write on my epitaph. I stopped selling my labor a long time ago. I said, my labor is not available for sale. My mom never put a price tag for raising me. She didn't say, oh, I put so many hours, you owe me this much. This is the market price for it. She didn't do that with her labor with me. Can I extend that to all living beings? Can I say my labor is not for sale? So I tried that. And maybe I'm a fool and maybe I die and you can have on my epitaph, on my grave, that here died a man who was recklessly generous. And I said, I'm okay with that. So how can we create a different narrative? How can we create a community around people who are championing love, who believe, like Gandhi believed? There are so many people before Borse that tried to assassinate Gandhi. Gandhi refused to have security. Everyone around him was scared. And so many times he would confront the people who were trying to kill him. Not confront, he would meet them. He says, yeah, okay, you want to kill me? No barrier. You know, it's not like a head of state, like you could never get to a head of state, because so much Secret Service. Like, have you ever been to the White House? I got to be at the White House, I mean, during Obama's time. But, yeah. The layers and layers and layers of security. Right? God, did you know security? You want to kill me? The joke's on you. And you're like, what is this guy thinking? But yeah, he got Raman Maharshi to cry. And he wasn't crying because Gandhi's body was passing away. So what is that narrative? What is that love? Ultimately, that's what service-based does. Right? That's what it stands for. That's what it tries to do. But there's no real agenda. I'm not trying to grow it. I don't really care. We're all dying. I just care about love. I've been like that from the day one, when you were my brother's roommate or in college. And so, you know, this has just been our journey, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's amazing to see. We were just doing small acts of love. And to see, you know, even to have President Obama call you up and say like, yeah, hey, you know, you guys don't make any sense. You don't ask for money, you don't do fundraising, you don't do anything. I mean, and yet all this stuff is happening. Like, what's going on? We'd like to learn from you. Would you come and be on our advisory council? And we're like, okay. And the day it was announced, I didn't even know. It was announced on a particular day. As in, I knew, but I didn't know when it was going to be announced. It was in like every newspaper in India. It was apparently like Indian on this thing. And everyone kept calling my parents. And so my parents called me and they were like, Nipun, what's going on? Like everyone's saying, your son is doing a great job. And they were like, yeah, he's been doing it for 20 years. You know? It's, for the world, it's like, oh wow, like, oh, this Obama cares for it, so it's a great thing. Or such and such cares for it. But for us, I think that the refuge has always been love. And the refuge has not just been, and when you get weak in your commitment to love, it's not these external systems. You take refuge in your affinities of love. So if 5 of us have been doing it together, if we have been making it a priority, instead of like watching TV or instead of going out and talking about nonsense, you serve others together. If you created that affinity, that when you get weak, you will have that community to remind you that love is a force. That actually it's a far stronger force than anything else. And so that's essentially what service-based does. You can go to the website and try to figure out more things and ways to engage. I would say all of you should try to, you know, go check out Daily Good. You're on Kind Spring. There's so many things. It's like such a big farm that, you know, I can't tell you too many things without boring you. But yes, spread. I think the core essence of it, I don't think it's service-based. I think it's love. I think it's about saying, yeah, we're going to go to India. Amitabh Bachchan, right? Like this, we got an Indian audience. Amitabh Bachchan comes to us. And he's like super moved by Karma Kitchen. He says, I want to volunteer. If Amitabh Bachchan comes to volunteer to do dishes, forget it. You can shut that whole place down, you know. Not just that day, like forever. Because it just, we're like, no, you can't do that. But why don't you do an act of kindness and you tell us about it. And so he would blog about it. So all these people, and you were like, wow, like who? We're just a bunch of everyday people. Just trying to be, but this is the power of love. It's just that we don't have faith. And the kind of stories we sort of champion is, oh my God, this big, smart, really, you know, amazing, talented, you know, rich person has accumulated, went from this much stuff to even this much more stuff, and look at that, like you should be like that. I grew up with those stories in the Silicon Valley. And I feel very fortunate that I wasn't moved to go down that path. I went down the path. I'm trying to, I'm not far from zero. I still got plenty of stuff inside, but I'm trying to go down that path, and it's been amazing. And it's been, I think it's very affirming for me that love is a very strong force.
Last question.
How can I tell I'm in what year I am in? First year, second year, third year, fourth year?
Or fifth year.
Or fifth year,
yes. Well, I mean, I don't think it's a destination.
Or does it matter?
I think it matters, but I don't think it's not exactly like college, where you graduate and you can't go back. I think in practice, it's actually moment to moment. So sometimes we have mind states that arise, which are not giving at all, which are not on any of those years. We're back in kindergarten being selfish. But at the same time, we can have mind states which are very skillful. We can have mind states which are very humble. So it's different mind states arising at different times. And the more we get pure on the inside, the more the predominance, you know, greater predominance of the more courageous and kind and caring and humble sort of end of the spectrum. So I think it's happening all the time. I think it would be very easy to say, give me a stamp and I'm done. Right? Okay, great, I love you, you're amazing, tell me, or I self-assess to myself, and yeah, I'm great. One of my mentors, one of my inspirations was a guy named Ishwar Patel, who passed away. He built more than, you know, I think 400,000 toilets, and started 150 organizations, and changed the face of sanitation in India. At his funeral, a few years ago, everybody, they had to shut down all the streets, everybody, from like the top of the country to the, you know, to the people who were living in the slums. They all came to pay their respects. And his wife goes up, and his wife says, he says, you know him as this man who won all these awards. You know him as this man that changed the world. You know him as this man that built so many toilets. You know him as this man that you were inspired by. But I'll tell you one thing about him that has always stayed with me, is that this man, in more than 40 years of our marriage, never once got angry with me. And so you realize what is the potential of that capacity. So it's not a state. It's not like I've arrived. It's that, oh, I am arriving, and in that arriving, I'm also going back and I'm going forth. And so in each moment, how can we remind ourselves? And I think the beauty of this is that we remind each other. Because if I'm in a selfish part of me, it will activate, it is more likely to activate a selfish part of you. But by that very token, if I am in that space in me of greater love, it will activate that in you. Don't you have stories of Mahavir where he's walking, even flowers are blooming, right? I don't know exactly, so if it's not true, that's what I've heard. But I believe it. That when you have such a pure being, that you're activating so much just by the virtue of your existence. So we have to ask ourselves that question, that in this moment, and the moment you're not aware, you're no longer even, you're back in kindergarten. If you think yesterday I was kind and so that's it, I can check out today, that means you're back in kindergarten. So if you're aware, and you see all that, and you're able to humbly and equanimously balance in a balanced way, you're able to see that, oh, yeah, I missed those opportunities. Today I didn't do anything kind for somebody else. That was just all about me. Well, I missed opportunities freshman year. Congratulations. Better than not. So I think we have to just tune into that every momentness. And that's not heavy, that's actually light. It feels heavy initially. You're like, oh my God, every moment I have to be mindful. But actually it's a lot heavier to be forgetful, to not be mindful, because that means you're going on your subconscious patterns, and that's a very expensive operation, karmically speaking. So, yes, I hope all of you go out, do little acts of kindness, spread love, hug each, I don't know, hug, yeah, maybe hug. Jane Temple, you can hug. I love to give hugs, so yeah, I'm around. There's smile cards there if you want to stay connected. There's a little email list. I'll drop you guys a note, and for me, I'm just an everyday guy. If I can help you in any way, drop me a note. Think of me as your brother, bald brother. But some people call me a kaka now, and I'm like, oh, I was in a rickshaw one time, and I was like, kaka, how about you doing this? And he's like, he looks back, and he's like, who are you calling kaka? Like, I'm kaka, then you are dada, So yes, think of me as a brother, kaka, or dada, whatever you want to think of me, but as in, I feel honored to be here with all of you. I feel honored to be in this space. Grab a friend, give a hug, go out and take some smile cards and kindness diaries and things like that.